Have you ever been stressed out about money? Hey, join the crowd. When it comes to money, we often lack breathing room. Less breathing room, more stress. So how do we create more financial margin, and how can we better honor God with our money? Well, we're talking about it today. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Epic Everywhere, practical teaching to help you grow in your faith no matter where you're at on your spiritual journey. My name is Emily, and I'm the pastor for Epic Online, and shout out to anyone who's new today. I'm not sure how you found us, but I'm so glad that you did, and we'd love to help you get connected right here at Epic Online. One of the first things that we do every time we're together is to text in. You can text in a few different ways today. You can text the word "here" to the number on the screen, or you can scan the QR code, and we'll text you back with a link that will take you to our Next Steps Hub. The Hub is a spot for all the things that you might need to make the most of today's experience, and also some resources that will help you as your week continues. So what's up on the Hub today? Well, you'll see a spot at the top where you can let us know how we can pray for you. It's that time of year when there are a lot of changes going down. Some of you are heading to college or a new job. Some of you are mourning the last weeks of summer, or you're sending your kids off to school. Let us know how we can pray for you. And when you're new, hey, be sure to text in. When you text in for the first time, we'll send you this free Epic t-shirt. This could be yours, your very own church merch, just to say thanks for hanging out with us. You'll also see a spot on the Hub where you can give today. As many of you know, we're in a 2-year growth journey called All In, where we're committing to growing in every area of our lives. So as we go along, we want to encourage you by sharing some stories of what this All In journey has looked like for people at our church. So let's go ahead and check out Jess's story together.
Hey, Epic Church family. My name is Jessica Curlett, and I am the Youth Location Director at Roxborough and one of the hosts of our 20s and 30s events. And I wanted to share a little about my all-in journey. I am filming this from my couch because, as Pastor Kent's message said a little while back, this is my chair where I make time to meet with God. One of the ways I've been being challenged through All In is to dig in and to go deeper, to not keep God or my time with Him to those check boxes or to-do list items of life group, prayer time, devotional, all those things that are so important to have in life. But what I'm learning through All In is that growing closer to God is less about the to-do and more about the who, as in who God is, and more about His character, not just through church or scripture, but in my everyday life, in the good, the bad, the in-between, everything. I am learning not to confuse God's silence with His absence, that while I'm walking and waiting, He's still working, that He can be trusted in the hard stuff to keep leading me through to an expected end that's ultimately for my good and His glory. And how beautiful is that we serve a God who walks alongside us and is always preparing us either for our present or a next chapter to come. So I encourage you, church family, to remember that God is still God outside of those check boxes, that growing closer with Him is more about increasing our faith and getting to know Him more deeply. And so I'm learning to trust God outside of the supposed to's or even the sometimes easy to do. And it has shown me so much about His faithful character. So that's a little about my journey. Thank you for listening. I'm Jess Curlett, and I am all in.
Thanks so much for sharing, Jess, and for shedding some light on how God is challenging you through All In. And I want to just take a moment to say thank you to all of you. Because of your generosity and your willingness to be all in, we were able to create a place where Jess's life and many others are being changed. So if you'd like to give to support all that God's doing and find out more about All In, you can go ahead and click the button on the Hub or check out our website, epic.church/allin. Well, as a part of this series that we're in called No Limits, we're creating a kNOwment of connection for each of you each week. This is a chance to get to know one another a little bit better. So each week, I'm going to be dropping a question right below this video. Today's kNOwment of connection is all about the limits that we sometimes lack. So have you ever bought something that you regretted? A little buyer's remorse? I know I'm not alone in this, so definitely drop your comment below this video. And in today's message, we're talking all things money. Money, money, money. Yeah, It's going to be good, way better than my singing. So let's go ahead and get to today's message.
Well, hey, my name is Jake. I'm the pastor at Epic Roxborough. Great to be with you today. We're in the middle of a series called No Limits, which is all about creating margin in our lives, about setting boundaries that both protect us and allow us to live the best life that God has for us. Now, our tendency is to think that we'll experience our best life, our most exciting life, achieve our fullest potential if we shed everything that we perceive as a limit. Because boundaries just hold us back. Like Nike would say, just do it, go for it. And there's certainly something to be said for stretching ourselves and pushing through artificial boundaries, giving 110%. And Jesus tells his followers to live in a way that's beyond our own abilities, that requires his help, his power in our lives. But God also knows that as humans, we intrinsically have limitations. He knows that because he created us. So he established principles for us to help us both accomplish amazing things in him, while also living in the reality that there are limits to our energy and to our resources. Now, when it comes to acknowledging that I have limits, I have historically not done well in this area. I have a hard time establishing boundaries that keep me from overextending myself. And so that's something that I just deal with. And my guess is that many of us could say the same thing. And that's because we want to make the most out of our lives. Being a driven person who wants to help other people while still having healthy boundaries, that's actually not very easy. It's an art form. It's actually a lot like eating at a buffet. And so here's why buffets are a good way to think about boundaries. We all know that eating is good. Like, we need to eat to survive. And God gave us a bunch of different great tasting foods and 10,000 taste buds. And so being able to enjoy good food really is a gift from God. And at a buffet, it's all paid for in advance. So you want to leave full. To do otherwise would be fiscally irresponsible, right? But we all know that there's a point where you can get too much of a good thing and you can eat so much that you make yourself sick. Last summer, before my son Micah went away for his freshman year of college, we went out to Fogo de Chao, the all-you-can-eat Brazilian buffet. It's a Brazilian steakhouse, and we wanted to kind of celebrate his big milestone. If you haven't been to Fogo, they have like 17 different cuts of meat. So it's kind of like a carnivore's paradise. Now, I know that we have some vegetarians among us, but before you tune me out, you should know they also have a really great salad bar, so hang with me there. Anyway, back to buffeting as an art form. Mike and I decided to go to Fogo for lunch instead of dinner because it's cheaper. Again, saving money is kind of part of the artistry for me. And to strategically prepare, we didn't eat breakfast, and then we went for a really long hike in the morning to kind of stir up that hunger. You can't neglect the pre-game protocol. Now, if you haven't been to Fogo de Chao, the salad bar is similar to other places. You go up and you serve yourself from the bar, but all the different meats are brought to you individually by these waiters. And the waiters look like this. They float around the dining room kind of like meat-toting angels. And you communicate with these meat-toting angels by these cardboard discs, which are green on one side, which means I'm ready to eat, it's go time. And then the red on the other side, which means I just need a minute to catch my breath. So Mike and I were enjoying our meal, and we're getting to the point where we know it's time to quit. So we're preparing to flip over our discs to red and ask for the check when one of those meat angels appears and asks us if we'd like honey cheese. We look at him like, honey cheese? He says, honey cheese. It looks like this. We're like, why not? So he plops down a couple pieces of honey cheese and floats away. Let me tell you, it was unlike anything I've ever had. At the risk of stating the obvious, honey cheese is cheese that's grilled with honey all over it. And let me tell you, it was a match made in heaven. So then, against our better judgment, we decided that we couldn't leave. And we stayed for about 4 more rounds of honey cheese. Every time we ate a serving, we were like, man, I can't eat any more. But then sure enough, we convinced ourselves that we could, and we did. Now, I really didn't feel great later that day, but even while I was eating, I knew that would be the case because I was violating a fundamental principle of the fine art of buffeting. When you're full, you gotta stop, no matter how glorious that honey cheese tastes. Just like you need to turn down the offer to work extra hours whenever you're overtired or you haven't spent time with your family lately, even if it would be nice to have the extra cash. Just like you should say no to another credit card that would further extend your debt ceiling, even though you'd really like to buy that thing that you can't afford right now. Just like we need to take a step back from relationships that take advantage of us, despite the fact we might start to be finding our identity in that sense of feeling needed. We need to have boundaries that we don't violate, regardless of the temptation we face in the moment, because later you will thank you. That's why the principles we're learning in this series are a lot like eating at a buffet. Because just like when we overeat, and there's consequences to pay later. But unlike overeating, those consequences usually don't go away in a day, and they usually affect people beyond ourselves. Such is the case with the area we're tackling today, our finances. We're talking about financial margin. Now, Scripture provides some really important principles around this topic that will benefit us whether or not we're a follower of Jesus. So I think this is going to be helpful for all of us. And if you are a Christian, we're going to see that there's so much more to be gained by proper boundaries in this area than just being free from unnecessary financial stress. So let's look at a really interesting parable that Jesus told. Now, parable is just a made-up story that's designed to make a point. The characters aren't real, the events didn't actually happen, but there's a lesson to be learned by the telling. So Jesus was the master of telling parables. He used them a lot. And there's often a common key figure that he used in his parables. Specifically, there's usually a king or an owner or a boss, and that authority figure represented God. Now, some of his parables were really difficult to understand, but at least in most cases, you identify that authority figure and say, well, that's got to be God. And from there, it'll kind of help you figure out what the point is of the story. But in this parable we're about to read, that's actually not the case. There is a rich man, an owner in the story, but he's not meant to represent God. So keep that in mind as we read. And as we do read this, I think you'll see why this owner wouldn't be a very good representation of what God is like. All right, so here we go. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager accused him of wasting his possessions. So he called him and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management because you cannot be manager any longer. So there's a wealthy guy, and he's so wealthy, he doesn't need to look after his own assets. He hires someone else that he trusts to do that for him. Problem is, his manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So the rich boss tells him to open up the books, bring him up to speed because he's getting fired. This manager is in a pickle. Manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master has taken away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. He's like, I'm a pencil pusher, not a ditch digger, but I gotta eat. So now what? Then he gets an idea. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. He says, I can't save this job, but since I wasn't fired on the spot, I've got one last chance to take advantage of this position to set me up for the future. So he called in each of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. Manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, make it 450. Manager's like, flash sale, 50% off, today only. He figured he can still leverage his position as manager to do some favors to people who owe his boss money. And after he's fired, maybe then they'll help him out. It's kind of like, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. And he didn't put all his eggs in one basket. He calls in another debtor. Then he asked a second, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill, make it 800. Now, I don't know why he only got 20% off and the first guy got 50. Maybe it's like those Kohl's postcards you get in the mail where you scratch it off to reveal your discount. But either way, the manager gives him a deal too. All right, so let's see how his boss, the rich boss, responds when he finds out about the master's shenanigans. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. So the manager essentially rips off his boss. He reduces the debts to a fraction of what's owed. And the boss responds with, well played, well played. It seems kind of weird. I would have expected him to be mad that he wasn't going to get paid back in full. But he's kind of like, hey man, you had a move to make to improve your position and you took it. That was smart. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewd. He acted strategically. And Jesus goes on to explain why the master gave such a positive response. He says that the people of this world, people who don't follow Jesus, are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light, people who do follow Jesus. Now, like I said, this parable can be a bit tricky because none of the players in it demonstrate good characters. We don't see like a hero in the story. But the big idea is that people of the world use money strategically to achieve their goals, which are based for them on worldly priorities. They utilize money to help them get what they want. So even though the master didn't benefit from what the manager did, he acknowledged that it was smart to play by those rules and to make that move. And Jesus comments on this, not to commend the dishonest behavior, that's not God's character, but rather draw a comparison. He points out that although their priorities and their methods and their values are flawed, the people of this world are shrewd. They're strategic in leveraging worldly wealth for their objectives. And in that sense, when it comes to leveraging financial resources for what we believe to be the most important thing, people of the light, Christians, we should be wiser. Jesus says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Some translations say that the friends, will welcome you into eternal dwellings. So what does that mean? Well, Jesus is contrasting the selfish shrewdness of the people of this world with the wisdom and intentionality that we, as followers of Jesus, should exhibit when it comes to our financial resources. When our time on earth is done, we should use our finances to be welcomed into those eternal dwellings. We should invest our money to advance God's kingdom, to point people to the eternal life that Jesus offers. And when we do that, when this life is over, we'll be welcomed into heaven. Jesus continues to explain the parable. He says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy with handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? If you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? Jesus doubles down on the importance of how we manage our money, and not just for the opportunities that we have to do good and to advance God's purposes with it here on earth, but also because of how we handle our money is actually a test. He says if you can be trusted to manage something of relatively small value, money, then you can be trusted with true riches, things of greater eternal value. You know, the scripture talks a lot about rewards in heaven for how we lived on earth, and also about earning positions of honor and positions of leadership in the next life. Here Jesus tells us that how we handle our worldly wealth, our money, is an indicator of whether being trusted with these true riches. And he makes the foolishness of idolizing money really clear in what he says here in the last verse. He reminds us that our money is actually someone else's property. It's not ours, it's God's. We're just managers with a temporary opportunity to handle our money in a way that proves we're worthy to handle our own true riches in the life to come. When it comes to money, there's a glaring difference between the mindset between those who follow Jesus and those who don't. And we see it all throughout Scripture. And here's what it is. People who follow Jesus' teachings store up their treasure for the next life. And those who don't store up their treasures here. Everything that Jesus taught about money was based on the premise that his followers were hoping, were longing for the next stage. When Jesus comes and makes all things right, when he establishes his kingdom, and when those of us who are followers of Jesus will receive our rewards. What Jesus taught about money can't make sense for anyone who's still focused on accumulating wealth in the here and now, whose primary concern is with comfort in this life and with their material possessions. So if you find that you honestly struggle with the Bible's teachings about money, it's probably good to honestly reflect on what it is you're living for. Is it to have the best, most comfortable life you can now? Or is it to invest all that you are and all that you have for the next life when Jesus establishes his kingdom? That's a question that I have to ask myself every time I'm reading something Jesus said about money, and internally I feel this kind of pushback, and it's like, I don't really like that. I have to ask myself, what am I living for, really? Is it for this world, or is it for the next? Are my treasures here, or are my treasures there? Because no matter what I might know is the right Christian answer, what really matters is what's motivating my heart. That's why Jesus felt so free to use the selfish, misguided shrewdness of the manager in the parable as a lesson for us as Christians. Even though he was operating from a completely wrong value system, he was at least acting strategically to accomplish his stated goal. And that's a challenge for us as followers of Jesus, because how we manage our money doesn't always reflect that same type of intentionality. And finally, Jesus ends his commentary on this parable with a passage of scripture that you may have heard before. He says, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." So one more time, Jesus creates this tension between our allegiance to what this world offers and what God offers. He says that money and God are mutually exclusive masters. You'll love one of them as your master, and as a result, you'll hate the idea of the other one being your master. So if you love serving God, man, you'd never want money to dictate how you live. And if your life is kind of driven by your finances and making money and having things, well, then you'll naturally resist fully submitting your life to God. Both God and money ask us to trust in them, and every day we choose which one we believe. This parable and Jesus' explanation provide a serious challenge about the role that money should play in our lives. So how does that relate to this whole idea of margin that we're exploring in this series? Well, here's one thing that I know. If you're under financial stress, if you have no margin, the money essentially becomes your master. If you've ever experienced intense financial pressure, you know it's true. When you aren't sure if you're going to have the money to pay your rent or have food to eat, man, money is all that you can think about. When you're living month to month and it feels like you're going to go under financially if any unexpected expenses come up, then money has a lot of control in your life. When you don't have the flexibility to give towards a need that you feel prompted that you should give towards, the money is actually dictating how you live. Even beyond the loss of good that could have been done if you had financial margin, you also become a slave to money when you're precariously living paycheck to paycheck. And Jesus said it's really hard to fully follow wherever Jesus would lead you when financial worry is controlling your life. Now, this is a good point to acknowledge that we are all in different financial situations. We have people from all different financial brackets and income brackets within our church. So how we hear and apply this message is probably going to look differently for each of us. In some ways, we might think that it's more of a risk for money to have mastery over us if our income is low, because the threat to not be able to have our basic needs met is actually feel like more of a realistic threat. On the other hand, Jesus shocked his disciples by saying to them that, hey, it's really, really hard for people who are rich to enter the kingdom of God. So who has a bigger challenge to trust God with their finances, the rich or the poor? The answer is yes, both. Let's look at this proverb from the Bible. "Two things I ask of you, Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, 'Who's the Lord?' Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God." Agur, the man who wrote this proverb, he knew that there are traps regarding money no matter what your financial status is. So his prayer was that he'd just have enough to have his basic needs met, because he didn't want to be tempted to do wrong in order to survive. If he did that, if he had to steal, that would dishonor God. But he also didn't want to have more than that, because he knew that it's so easy for money to become consuming when we have means. So no matter how we describe our financial situation, there's a temptation for money to become our focus in a way that interferes with our devotion to God. So practically speaking, how does this idea of margin help? Well, margin creates an intentional buffer between what you expect to come in and what you expect to be your expenses. And so to create a buffer with your time, what we do is we make sure we don't completely fill up our calendar so that we have time just to rest, and so that we are able to do things that might come up last minute that we want to be able to do. So we create buffer in our calendars. And when it comes to our money, we want to do the same thing. We can't do that without employing a word that might make us feel a little bit sick in our stomach. That word is budget. Like it or not, we can't be good stewards of the money that God has entrusted to us if we don't, one, know how much money we regularly have coming in, and two, how we're usually spending it. As much as creating a budget and tracking your spending might sound like a headache, believe me, the peace and clarity it can bring is worth much more than the inconvenience of actually tracking your finances. Sometimes I talk with people and they tell me I'm really stressed about money. And I ask them, well, how does your income compare to what you're regularly spending?
Jaden has $1 bill, 1 quarter, and 2 pennies. How much money does he have? Jaden broke.
When you don't have a budget, there's no way to feel good about your finances, much less a way to establish margin. You'll either always be wondering if you should be spending what you're spending, even if it is a reasonable purchase, or you'll just not think about it and just buy whatever you want, which is a pretty good way to make sure you dig yourself into a hole. It's kind of like driving without a speedometer in your car and with no speed limit signs on the road. You're never going to feel comfortable driving by a police officer because you're only guessing about whether or not you're heading for trouble. But if you'll take the time to figure out what your income is, and then list out all of your regular expenses, both the fixed costs like housing, utilities, clothes, food, transportation, and also discretionary funds like eating out or recreation, you can actually figure out what's coming in if that can cover what's going out regularly. Now, it might sound simplistic, but you can't experience the peace and freedom of financial margin that we're talking about if you don't create and abide by a budget that has margin that's built into it. Now, I do know that some people, they just don't want to create a budget because they feel hopeless. And they don't want to see that grim picture actually detailed out in black and white. If that's where you're at, and I know how difficult this topic can be. But there is a way out, even if it's not quick, and there are people who can help you through it. But you'll never reach a better destination if you don't take a first step. And that first step has to be taking inventory of your financial situation. So once you have a budget, you can see how your expenses relate to your income. And this takes honesty, because just not listing out things you spend money on doesn't mean the money is still not going out the door. So if you eat out, if you grab a coffee, if you go to movies, and you need to realistically account for those in your expenses, or you're not going to have an accurate picture of your financial situation. And within those expenses, you should also include your plan for giving and your plan for savings. Now, those aren't the same as paying bills, but they still represent money that's committed. If you've been around Epic for a while, you know that we see in the Bible a pattern of first giving, then saving, and then living on the rest. Scripture teaches us that everything comes from God, and one way that we honor God is to regularly give back to Him a percentage of what He's given to us. And 10% is an example that we see pretty commonly throughout Scripture, but the exact percentage that you should give, really, you should figure out by praying and asking God to lead you into that. Whatever that amount is, the Bible teaches it should represent a sacrifice for you. So our first priority is showing our trust in God and our thankfulness to Him by giving back to Him. And the second is to establish our savings. That's part of our margin. See, if you pre-decide your margin and set that aside, then you can establish your budget, your standard of living on what remains. So if you bring home $1,000 and you decide, I'm going to give $100 of that to God, and I'm going to set aside $100 for my savings account, well, then you have $800 to put towards your living expenses. So then you can compare that income and determine if you can afford the way that you're living right now. Now, you may discover I actually need $900 to keep my standard of living that I have right now. So that means something needs to give. Either one, you're not going to have any margin. Two, you're not going to give back to God what you had planned to give back to God. Three, you need to reduce those expenses below $900 to $800. Or four, you need to increase your income beyond $1,000. For many people, if they bring home $1,000, they feel like that's just my green light to go ahead and spend $1,000. And if money is just a way for me to reach my goals, then I assume it's all for me to consume. But if we aren't moved by what Jesus said about honoring God with our money, I think we all can see that that way of living has some definite flaws in it. Every financial advisor tells you that you need to have margin built into your budget, to have emergency savings, because no one wants unnecessary financial stress from the unexpected expenses that are inevitable. They always are going to happen. But despite this consensus on the need for savings, it's still not commonplace. A Ramsey Solutions study tells us that 45% of Americans have less than $1,000 in emergency savings. That means that almost half of us feel unnecessary stress around the possibility of a broken appliance, an unexpected medical bill, or the need to get new tires. Now, $1,000 isn't the ultimate end goal for savings, but it's a first milestone for having a reasonable amount of margin that reduces that stress that we have. So leaving today, my hope is that we'll all make a plan for an appropriate amount of emergency savings, because having financial margin will make such a big difference for you. I think you'll be surprised at how much better you feel when you have that pressure relieved. And if you're a follower of Jesus, if your goal is to be all in for him, then the value of financial margin is much more than a way to relieve unnecessary financial stress. It's about having a balanced biblical perspective on the role of money in our lives. It's about rejecting the common assumption that it's all for my consumption, and instead recognizing that it's all for God's purposes. Now, God's purposes for your money include meeting your needs, meeting the needs of your family, even enjoying some of the things that money can buy. But it always has the bigger picture in mind. And ask this question: what should my budget look like to show that my ultimate home and my true treasures are in heaven? What should my budget look like to show that my ultimate home and my true treasures are in heaven? That means that we allocate money to invest in God's work as a first priority. And our margin, our savings aren't just to make sure we have what we need when we're in a pinch, but to ensure we have the financial flexibility to give to others when God puts it on our hearts to do so. And again, that looks differently for all of us because all of us have a different financial reality. But remember, God doesn't evaluate us based on what we don't have, but what we do with what we do have, how we honor him with what he's been given to us. And Jesus said, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Those of us who don't have the financial resources to give or save huge amounts of money, we still have the opportunity to prove that we can be trusted with what we do have. And those of us who have financial resources that are greater, we also have the opportunity to show we're trustworthy with everything that we've been given to manage. God has allowed each of us to have the financial situation we currently find ourselves in. And we each can honor him with what he's entrusted to us. It's like Jesus said, let's be intentional about how we handle our money. Let's be strategic in building God's kingdom with our resources. Let's make sure that money is our servant, not our master. It starts with being intentional with having a budget that first gives to God and has margin that provides us with the ability to be generous. Not only will we experience more peace and joy with our finances in this life, we'll have confidence when we're getting ready to enter the next. So let me pray for us. God, I'm so grateful, Lord, that you give us lessons, you give us principles for our lives that maybe are counterintuitive. God, I know that our inclination is to grab all that we can, to use all that we have at our disposal to gratify ourselves immediately. God, we live in a culture that tells us we always need more. But God, I pray that we would have your perspective, God, that we would begin to have a new mindset, that you transform our thinking. God, that when we think about our money, we think about, what does God want me to do with this? Lord, that we would give first to you. Lord, that we would create savings, that we create margin in our lives so that we don't have to feel financial stress about what's going to happen in the future. And God, that we have the flexibility to be generous when you provide those opportunities. God, I pray for those who are in a difficult financial situation, who they hear this and they're like, man, I don't know how I can get there. I really don't know how I can have margin in my life. God, one, I pray you give them encouragement that they can trust you. God, two, I pray that you provide for them. And three, God, I pray you give them wisdom to navigate this and even to be able to ask for help from someone if they need it. And God, for those who've been entrusted with with greater financial resources, Lord, I pray that they would sense that responsibility, that gift it is to be able to be generous and to honor you with what they've been entrusted with. And God, for all of us, may we remember, Lord, that our true treasures are with you. God, that this world is temporary, and God, that we can invest in something that's so much better than money can buy. So God, we love you, we honor you, and we thank you that you can challenge us in this way. Give us the grace to carry it out. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Great to be with you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much for that message, Jake. That is such a powerful, sometimes daily challenge to reject the common assumption that our money is all for our consumption and instead recognizing that it's all for God's purposes. It's really a game changer. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to miss out on something amazing that God's got planned for me because I'm mismanaging my money. So let's get better together. This has been such a great series so far. And good news, we've got 2 more weeks left of No Limits. And if you've missed any episodes, you can catch up right here on our YouTube channel, where you'll also find a playlist filled with all kinds of music from our band, Epic MSC. Well, it's been a great day today. Thank you so much for being a part. Be sure to invite someone to join you, and we'll see you right back here next week.